In the 1970s, 23 million homeless pets were killed each year in the United States, 112 for every 1,000 people in the country, a miserable 12% save rate. There was no such thing as shelter medicine because animals were usually killed within hours or days of entering the shelter. Sick pets were almost never treated, they were just killed.
Well, most shelters didn't have veterinarians. The country really was focused on processing animals. There was about 24 million dogs and cats coming through shelters. Very few of them were leaving alive.
In the 1970s, we were still at a time when we had dog pounds, and the status of dogs and cats was not nearly as high in the public eye. And so we still had dogs and cats being euthanized because there was no space. Certainly a lot of sick animals were euthanized immediately. There also just was no shelter medicine as we understand shelter medicine today.
In the years between 1970 and 1996, the number of pets killed in shelters in the US dropped from around 23 million to 6 million. That meant the lives of an estimated 42% of homeless pets were being saved.
It's hard to imagine now, but back then there were no courses in shelter medicine, and veterinarians that worked in animal shelters weren't very well respected by their colleagues. Things began to change in the late 90s, and one of those changes was Maddie's fund developed our veterinary school guidelines for colleges of veterinary medicine to apply for shelter medicine training grants. Another milestone was the ASPCA partnered with Cornell University to develop the very first course in shelter medicine called Issues in Preventative Medicine in Animal Shelters, taught by Dr. Lila Miller and Dr. Jan Scarlett.
Well, Maddie's fund initial goal was to try to create a no-kill nation and to basically achieve a status where we can guarantee all the healthy and treatable dogs and cats a loving home. We had to have the medical expertise that knew the specialties required in a shelter environment. It's an institutional companion animal care center. And it's different than a person's private pet, but it's also different than a herd of cattle. And so we really wanted to have veterinarians who understood the unique challenges and opportunities associated with this. And if we really were going to cure the injured and the ill and the poorly behaved, we needed to have the medical expertise readily at hand for shelters to utilize this expertise to achieve our goal, which was a no-kill nation.
With that goal in mind, in 1999, Maddie's fund awarded a grant to fund the country's first shelter medicine residency program at UC Davis. That resident was Dr. Kate Hurley.
And I think back to the animal control officer and kennel attendant that I was in my early 20s. It was my first real job. And how hard I tried to do right by the animals in my care, how little I knew, how alone I felt, and how heartbreaking the mistakes were. And when I came to vet school and I learned the things that were just part of the curriculum of vet school and realized those tools could have been in my hands, I was so frustrated knowing how many thousands of animals, hundreds of thousands, millions of animals were out there at risk right then as I sat in the classroom, how many people were hungry for that information and that we weren't putting it in their hands seemed so wrong.
That was the beginning of a movement centering shelter medicine education in the universities, focused on developing and spreading life-saving information and protocols from the academic world out into the world of animal shelters.
I had this fantasy that there would be a strong voice coming from academia, coming from the veterinary schools, that would be based in really pairing the science with the practice in shelters, that somebody would marry those two things that had always been separate before. With the Maddie's grant, with the residency, one person, me, had a chance to just sit down for 3 years, think about shelters, and look at the research, and put those things together.
In 2001, the Association of Shelter Veterinarians was formed. Part of its mission was to make shelter practice a boarded specialty of veterinary medicine, as well as to create standards of care for animals in shelters. Those standards were published in 2010. Today, Maddie's Fund is the largest charity in the world to offer grants in shelter medicine and has invested $16 million to fund shelter medicine education. Of the 28 veterinary colleges in the United States, all those with comprehensive shelter medicine programs have received financial support from Maddie's Fund. Additionally, all but 9 of the nation's veterinary colleges have received funding for sheltering education from Maddie's Fund.
But they included faculty members from a couple of
So probably the most inspiring development that we can see today is that the field went from basically being non-existent to having a boarded specialty in veterinary medicine. And the Association of Shelter Veterinarians has over 750 members with 22 student chapters. Animal shelters now have experts that they can turn to at universities to help them with disease outbreak responses, helping them with preventing disease outbreaks, helping them with designing their shelters and behavior enrichment programs, and giving these pets a chance at a better outcome.
In the past, shelters frequently had to respond to disease outbreaks by high euthanasia rates of the animals in the shelter. They just didn't know that there were alternatives to cleaning house and starting over. It's been so rewarding to take the tools we're developing at the University of Florida into these shelter outbreaks, helping them develop strategies for segregating the animals, treating the ones that have become sick, and coming through the other side of these storms without euthanizing any animals.
You can see they lost a couple of incisors, so.
Perhaps the most valuable assistance shelters get from shelter medicine programs is not what to do in response to an outbreak, but how to prevent one from happening at all.
And this guy's only 2'2", so you can feel how...
Veterinarians and students from these programs visit animal shelters and perform in-depth assessments of their day-to-day operations, providing recommendations for steps the organizations can take to protect, care for, and ultimately save the lives of the animals in their care.
Soon after our assessment by University of Florida and the team from UC Davis Shelter Medicine Program, we started a relationship with Purdue University.
He was so scared.
It has benefited our shelter greatly because we learn about titer testing in dogs for parvovirus and distemper. We realize how important using Panazaril is for treating coccidia. We go ahead and learn about FIV and the long-term health effects. All these are studies that are being done with Purdue at our facility.
You don't have to worry as much. Okay.
While the system of veterinary care for animals in shelters is different from that in private veterinary practice, the animals themselves are not. Just like pets living in homes, individual shelter pets need different things to stay healthy and happy.
The big changes that we're seeing now is to develop shelters that are focused around the needs of each individual animal and to recognize that each of these animals is quite unique in its attributes and needs. We're also learning how to leverage foster homes as part of the life-saving strategy for treatable animals that aren't ready for adoption yet. It used to be that foster homes were used just to expand the capacity of the shelter, but now we know that we can treat parvo in foster homes, ringworm in foster homes, or help a shy animal find its trust in people so it can be adopted. These are new models that are expanding the reach of the shelter and also providing better care for those animals while they wait for their forever homes.
Today, hundreds of communities across the United States are saving more than 90% of their homeless cats and dogs. Shelter adoption has risen in popularity, now accounting for nearly 1/3 the acquisition of a new family dog or cat. And as the scope of what's possible in terms of both life-saving and adoption has changed, so have the attitudes and expectations of the public.
A survey was done of people throughout America about what they think shelters and rescues should be all about. 71% said that they believe that shelters should be rehoming agencies, that they should not kill animals that are healthy and treatable. The nation of people in this country today believe in a no-kill nation. Shelters have not embraced enough of that commitment to basically make it a reality, but shelter veterinary medicine is making that dream come true.
I think you absolutely can't divorce shelter medicine from the goal of a no-kill America. And I say this as someone who, when I started the residency, I didn't believe in the goal of a no-kill America. I wanted it, but I didn't believe it could happen. And the residency and the experiences that it's enabled me to have, in dialogue with the progression of our profession, has turned me into a fervent believer.
It's okay, it's okay.
Thanks to advances in shelter medicine education and research, health and behavior problems that were once considered impossible to treat or prevent are now being cured and managed, and treatable animals are finding loving homes in ever-increasing numbers.
One of the most exciting changes in sheltering is the optimism that's developing around saving lives. It used to be that we considered certain categories of animals just unredeemable or without the reach of the shelters to save. And we now know that we can dig deep into those treatable animals and provide them with either short-term care or long-term care, specialized care, behavior rehabilitation, and nurturing that they need. And there's very few animals anymore that we feel that we can't save.
While there is still a great deal of work to be done, the world of today is a different place when it comes to educating veterinarians about shelter animals and their needs. There are 22 student chapters of the Association of Shelter Veterinarians, comprised of students who are studying shelter medicine and those who don't have that opportunity, but would like to care for homeless pets during the course of their careers. As we move into the future, it's hard not to wonder, what difference will that next generation of veterinarians make?
Having an army of veterinarians who are prepared to enter shelters and work there directly or to help from their own private practices, but having a knowledge base in shelter medicine to be effective is critical for helping animals around the country. It's still remarkable that so many shelters don't even have a veterinarian helping, and lay people are doing the best they can, but they're just not trained in what those animals need. Right now, there are a few schools that are training future veterinarians to have that knowledge base they need to help shelters, but most of the schools are not very deep in that regard. We are developing online resources and programs so that veterinary students at other schools can be trained, even if they don't have a local program, and the reach of those programs need to be expanded.
I think it's a very exciting time in animal sheltering and that it has a very bright future. Adoption rates are on the rise. There's increasing partnerships between animal shelters and local pet rescues. I think communities across the country are being more aware that they can get a happy, healthy pet from an animal shelter.
Despite its incredible growth, shelter medicine is still a field with vast, unexplored opportunity. What remains to be done? And what will the continued growth of shelter medicine mean for homeless pets?
In the last decade, shelter medicine programs have really looked at training students and trainees in the art of shelter medicine practice. But I think that there's also an element now of trying to bridge that gap between our colleagues that are working in private practice and then our colleagues that are really staying in shelter medicine practice. And I think that there's a real room for more outreach to private practitioners to help them engage in their local shelter.
The university's voice, and the veterinary voice in general, has legitimacy where we need it most. We already have the buy-in of the rescuers and the progressive nonprofit animal welfare organizations. But if we're going to win this thing, we need every little animal control shelter next to every wastewater treatment plant. We need them. We need to reach them. We need this message to be there. And they're the ones that really can hear it much better often when it's presented in our voice from the academic side of things.
Shelter medicine is at a really critical point right now. And up until now, we've been amassing a body of knowledge of precedents for what can work really well in shelters. But what we need still is to get that information out into the hands of the people on the front lines, the veterinarians, the shelters, the rescue groups that are really out there in the field and need this information in order to be able to change the way that sheltering is done.
Shelter medicine, like any medical program, seems to have a never-ending need. These require the specialty, expertise, and knowledge of shelter veterinarians to help us reach the next plateau. So if we really want to find cures for the incurable, if we really want to guarantee that all of our dogs and cats going to shelters and rescues end up in loving homes, they're a critical component of our life saving.
Shelter medicine has so much to offer. It's continuously advancing, developing evidence-based best practices for animal shelters. This information, this message, is being shared and disseminated through shelter consultations, through conferences. There's books being written about it, articles, websites, webcasts, and it's wonderful to see shelters and rescues taking advantage of this information, implementing it, and improving their life-saving work.
Our goal is to maximize life-saving. At Maddie's Fund, we want to save lives. We don't care who is doing the life-saving, we want to save lives, and we want to help other organizations, we want to help everyone.
None of us can do it alone. It's everybody working together, and what we hope to do at Maddie's Fund is to learn from everybody's experience, share our successes, share our disappointments as well, and empower people to do a better job.
It is up to all of us working together to do that better job by carrying this vision into the future. That one day, soon, we will save all our healthy and treatable homeless pets and truly become a no-kill nation.